So in this archetypal criticism, we will be covering the works of J.S. Frazer, Carl Jung, Northrop Frye, Maud Bodkin. Again, Maud Bodkin, then J.G. Fraser. They were the initiator of this archetypal myth or archetypal criticism. And then others started to follow, such as Carl Jung. He's one of the important figure, and Northrop Frye. So it's a I mean Carl Jung said that a form of criticism based largely on the works of Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell. Okay, these were also the two important figures associated with this archetypal criticism. Now, some of the major figure apart from Carl Jung were Robert Graves, Francis Ferguson, Philip Wheelwright, Leslie Fielder, Northrop Frye, Maud Watkin, and G. Wilson Knight. They were all at some point of time said something associated with archetypal criticism. So these critics view the genres and individual plot patterns of literature as recurrence of certain archetypes and essential mythic formula. Now you see, archetypal criticism actually interprets a text by focusing on recurring myths. For instance, what J.G. Fraser will say in his book Golden Fraser, that every culture contains death rebirth myth, whether it is a culture from European context, Eastern context, Indian context, Hinduism, Muslimism, they all talk about this death and then rebirth myth. Okay, they have this story, you will see. Also, you will find the recurring myth of a hero heroine. Most of the time, you will find that there is a hero, there is a heroine, and a story is almost incomplete without these two important figures. If they won't be there, the story seems to be income. I mean, who is the protagonist? Who is the heroine? The first question when we read a text or we watch a movie is that who is the hero? Who is the hero? So this is also part of that archetypal myth that existed from the very beginning. That okay, whenever there is a story, there will be Ram, there will be Sita, or there will be Zeus and goddess Hera. Okay, there will be Apollo and the complementary part of Apollo. That's how we have seen the world. Okay, these are the things that has been traced by these archetypal critique. They started to actually figure out that who are these I mean, what are these recurring myths and archetypes in the narrative, which were used as symbols sometime, or which were also used as a kind of character. Okay, they will talk about this. So Carl Jung, as I have said, that he is the important figure associated with archetypal criticism. Before Carl Jung, I will uh, come back to this PDF. That yeah, Maud Bodkin wrote this work, Archetypal Pattern in Poetry, 1934. Okay, 1934. Archetypal Patterns in Poetry. Now see, when we read about archetypal criticism, we mainly talk about Carl Jung, okay, and his work. But then Maud Watkin very early in 1834 itself, he wrote this work, Archetypal Patterns in Poetry, where he is trying to say that how these patterns can be seen in almost all the poetical works. Okay, the patterns that he is referring. So the anthropological origin of archetypal criticism can be seen 30 years before its analytical psychology begins. So Golden Boy is written around 1890 by J.G. Frazer. And you see archetypal patterns in poetry has been written in 1930. So almost 30 years prior to the archetypal pattern in poetry written by Maud Botkin, J.G. Frazer already wrote the Golden Boy. And this Golden Boy is again why this book is important, because T.S. Eliot was very much indebted to this Golden Boy while he was writing The Wasteland. Okay, so Golden Boy is equally important. Now, Golden Boy is a seminal text on myths. It talks about the myths. Fraser here identifies practices, and mythological beliefs shared among primitive religion and modern religion. What are the things which were there in the followed by the primitive religion, and from those practices by the primitive religion groups or ethnic groups, what are the things that we are still carrying forward? Okay, it's not that it has been lost all the way in the past itself. No, we are still using some of these myths in our religion. Some of these practices are still going. So tries to trace those things. He argues that the death rebirth myth is present in almost all the cultural mythologies. Almost all the cultural methodology, whether they are someone from different tribe, different country, different point of origin, they all share this common kind of myth that after death there is a rebirth based upon what you have did in your present. So it is acted out in terms of growing seasons and vegetation. For instance, see, death is the final harvest, rebirth is the spring fruitful kind of season. So it's a kind of rebirth. How we associate seasons. For example, when Shelley is talking about the west wind is both the destroyer as well as preserver. Okay, it is destroying in order to create something. It stands for death as well as rebirth. In the same way, different season stands for different point of time in our life. Spring stands for rebirth, then there is death, and the winter stands for almost, yeah, winter almost stands for death. Okay, so you will find these recurrent motif and symbols in the text, whether they are poetry or novels. So these are the common things that you will find. Now, archetype means patterns or model. It was first seen in the writings of Plato, but then it was popularized by Carl Jung. Carl Jung coined the term archetype. An archetype is a symbol, pattern, or behavior which is universal. Universal. It was applicable in the primitive society. 3000, let's say 3000 years from now, it is still applicable. We are still exercising or practicing that same theory. So it's universal in that sense. So it can be seen in almost all the cultures. The use of archetypal symbols or patterns give a literary work universal acceptance, as readers are able to identify with the characters and situation. For example, I say that in any piece of work we have hero and heroine. This is common for almost all the works or literary piece, whether it belongs to India, Africa, China, Japan, or Indonesia, or for that matter, UK, US. This is very common. Protagonist should be there. Okay. It's a kind of long tradition that we are following. So as a reader, that's why we are able to identify. Otherwise, let's say my myth is very much different from that of USA. Then when I will be you reading some book from America, I won't be able to understand the things. Okay, because we share some common bonding irrespective of the land or culture to which we belong. That's why we are able to understand things in a proper way, even when we are reading different texts from different uh, parts of country or world. So there is something which is in common because the situation and character we can see are actually drawn from the experience of the real world. There are different types of archetype, character archetype, like Rapunzel, a long hair, beautiful girl trapped in tower. Okay, she's one of the, I mean, I'm giving just one example. Character archetype will be like Rapunzel, Romeo and Juliet, Ram and Sita. That people used to say that, oh, how beautiful they are looking, like Ram and Sita. Okay. How good they badly they are in love and they sacrificed everything like Romeo and Juliet. Why? Like Romeo and Juliet. We are using those figure from our past in order to justify things that are happening in the present time. That's how we use archetype. That's why it is still relevant. So, archetype, according to Carl Jung, are primordial images. Primordial images are actually primordial times was a prehistoric time, the birth of this world, how this creation of world occurred in different. religion. Okay, so primordial images refers to that. The psychic residue of repeated types of experience in the lives of ancient ancestors. So, uh, see, for instance, we find that there is a protagonist or hero and heroine. Uh, Even at the beginning of the world, when the world has been created, we have Adam and Eve. Okay, followed by let's say Romeo and Juliet, followed by um, let's say Sarah Woodruff and Charles from French Left-Hand Woman. Okay, followed by the let's say the protagonist from modern novel. So there is a psychic residue of repeated type of character, repeated type of experience is there in almost all the generation, which has been carried forward. Okay, from past generation to the next, from next to the next, and that's how it reaches to us. Okay, so example, color white is associated with innocence or could signify death or the supernatural. Okay, so most of the time, color white is associated with innocence. Why do we not say that okay, color white is is an association, or color white can stand for blood, bloodshed, death? Why not? Why do we say that red color is associated with bloodshed? Why do we call black color is related to death? Why? Because I mean, we have this kind of archetypal. This is also a kind of archetypal myth that existed from very beginning. We don't know from where it came into existence. If you will actually say what is the point of origin, how we started to associate a color with a particular emotion or feeling, you won't be able to find that, but it exists. So, yeah, so we have types of characters according to this archetypal myth and all that. Hmm. Character archetype. First one is the character archetype. Second is the situational archetype. What is situational archetype? Flood is very important archetype image that we see in almost all the myths of various religion. For example, Noah's flood. Noah's flood in Christianity. Pralay. Pralay even Pralay, a flood will come and submerge the land. This is in Hinduism. And the concept of Sailab in Muslims. All of these are, see how these different religions shares a common kind of acknowledgement towards this flood. That at the end of the world, when the world will be destructed, uh, and the world will get over, then a flood will come and submerge the land with water, something like that. So this is situational architect. This is the example of situational architect. So what is archetypal criticism? One, they asked in UGC Net just to define what is archetypal criticism, and you have had two, three different options. So archetypal criticism seeks to analyze and identify these recognizable archetypes in the box of literature. This was the answer. This was the answer of that question. Okay, there were four options out of that. Archetypal criticism seeks to analyze and identify these recognizable archetype in the box of literature. This would be the right answer. This archetype seems to us identifiable because we can see them in the form of myth, dreams, rituals. Okay. Now, what important work came in between uh, this archetypal pattern by Bodkin and Carl Jung was Hero with a Thousand Faces. Okay, Hero with a Thousand Faces. It was written by Joseph Campbell, 1949. Do remember. Hero with a Thousand Faces, written by Joseph Campbell. Now, Joseph Campbell gave the idea of monomyth, and he borrowed this term from James Joyce. Okay, gave the idea of monomyth, and he borrowed this term, used this term from James Joyce. James Joyce actually used this term monomyth. Now, what is monomyth? A universal pattern of heroic tales across different cultures and genres. For example, how James Joyce used the idea of Odysseus, okay, the ancient epic, in order to form his own novel Ulysses. He followed the same pattern, okay, in a very modern kind of interpretation of a text which was written long back by Homer. Okay, so this shows that this monomyth is actually a pattern of heroic tales across different cultures and genres, irrespective of the genre. Because see, Odysseus was written as an epic, and this Ulysses is written as a kind of novel. Again, Tennyson's Ulysses was written as a poem. So, but they follow a kind of same pattern almost. At least Odysseus and Ulysses by James Joyce follows the same pattern. So this is what he mean by monomyth. Okay. So do remember this word. Now see, uh, what is the difference between how Sigmund Freud or Lacan saw a particular mind and how archetypal critics they saw the mind. See, Sigmund Freud or Lacan, they saw human mind as individual mind. Okay, they are capable of thinking individual. Let's say if I saw a particular dream, it's my dream. It has nothing to do with others. Okay, it will be based upon whatever I felt that day, and then I saw a dream. So they were talking about the individual mind. They said that uh, Laka said that language is like unconscious. Okay, structured like unconscious. So Sigmund Freud will also talk about in his interpretation of dream about the dream formation and all. We'll talk about that when I will be dealing with psychoanalysis theory. But then what archetypal critics are saying, they are saying that we human beings are we have this individual mind, but then we have collective consciousness. That is the reason that even in across different culture we share something common. Okay, collective consciousness. This is the term that has been used by archetypal critics. Collective consciousness. Otherwise, how this pattern of Romeo Juliet, Ram Sita would have been there in different culture across different parts of world? How we have this notion of flood, the destruction of world. Okay, how we have this notion, the beginning of world and end of world in common in almost all the religion, all the parts of world. We share a common collectiveness at the center actually. Okay, so collective consciousness. This is what archetypal critics said that particular term. Now, Carl Jung was a Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst. He founded analytical psychology, Jungian psychology, called Jung's. We also called Jungian psychology. So, yeah, before I move on to Carl Jung, I will talk about J.G. Frazer first. So, some of the books which are important written by J.G. Frazer are The Golden Bow, a study in the comparative religion, which helped T.S. Eliot a lot while he was writing this book, The Wasteland. So, Golden Bow, a study in the comparative religion. The title has been derived from J.M.W. Turner's painting. Do remember, the Golden Bow, the title of this particular book has been derived from J.M.W. Turner's painting. Okay, there was a painting made by J.M.W. Turner. From there, J.G. Fraser actually took the title of his work. Then what happened is that he later on retitled this particular book into a new title. He gave a new title. What was the new title? Golden Bow, a study in magic and religion. Initially, it was a study in comparative religion. Then he said that a study in magic and religion. Because in myths, you will find so many of magics happening. So he said that a study in magic and religion. Then the second important work written by J.G. Fraser is Folklore in the Old Testament. Folklore in the Old Testament. Studies in comparative religion, legend, and law. This was the subtitle. So Golden Bow was more related to finding symbols in myth. Okay, myth criticism kind of how we find same kind of symbol everywhere across different cultures and irrespective of the space. So Golden Boy J.G. Frazer got the title of the book from painting by J.M.W. Turner, like I've said just now. Also, Robert Graves, the poet who was writing during this World War time and even after that. So Robert Graves wrote this work, uh, The White Goddess, 1948, a historical grammar of poetic myth. Okay, The White Goddess, a historical grammar of poetic myth. Again, it is an archetypal work. We know Robert Graves for his poetry, but this is a critical work based upon the archetypal criticism. So, in The White Goddess, Robert Graves used the myths from Fraser's Golden Bough. He is indebted to J.G. Fraser's Golden Bough while he was writing The White Goddess. Okay, that's why this work becomes important. Then he wrote 7 Days in New Crete or Watch the North Wind Rise. This is also a work written by Robert Graves. 7 Days in New Crete or Watch the North Wind Rise. Okay, Watch the North Wind Rise. This is another work written by Robert Graves. Now, in what White Goddess, Robert Graves approach to the study of mythology from a decidedly creative and idiosyncratic perspective. He argues that true or pure poetry is inextricably linked with the ancient cult ritual of his proposed white goddess and of her son. Okay, again, a kind of myth that he's trying to exercise in this particular work. But what is important is only the title of the work. Just remember the title of the work. The White Goddess, a historical grammar of poetic myth. Then second work is 7 Days in New Crete. Uh, the alternative title of the same work is Watch the North Wind Rise, 1949. Yeah, now we will come back to Carl Jung. So, as I have said, that Carl Jung, his most important work is Archetype and the Collective Unconsciousness. Okay, Archetype and the Collective Unconscious, 1959. I told you that these archetypal critique, they will focus on collective unconscious instead of individual mind. They will say that we have collective unconscious, collective consciousness also. So this term archetype was coined by Carl Jung, as I have told you. Now, three important features of archetype, according to Carl Jung, is that first one is collective unconscious. First one is collective unconscious, a set of primal memories common to the human race existing below each person's conscious mind. Okay, it refers to experience which are shared by a race or culture, uh, irrespective of the time in which they were living, irrespective of the uh, space and time. I mean, irrespective of the chronotopic movement. Okay, so we share a common experience uh, shared by a particular race or a culture, irrespective of in which time we are, in which space we are. This is what Carl Jung said collective unconscious. Okay, collective unconscious. Now, what is the next feature of archetype? He said that archetypes are universal. Archetypes are universal. Obviously, archetypes will be universal. That's why something which is there, let's say 3000 from now, we still remember that, we still use that. It's universal. It's applicable everywhere. Third point is that archetypes are primordial. Primordial, I told you. See, primordial. Like Chomsky's universal grammar. Chomsky, while he was giving this term, universal grammar, that by birth, we have this kind of language acquisition device, inbuilt in our memory. through which we learn language and all. So it's a kind of that's how we also learn the grammar. So universal grammar. In the same way, archetypes are primordial. It is there from the very birth of this world itself. So he said three important features of archetype are collective unconscious, then archetype are universal, then archetypes are primordial. Now there was a question asked in UGC Net that myth criticism focuses on what? Then there were four options. So the answer would be the recurrence of archetypal patterns. The recurrence of archetypal patterns. Okay? The recurrence of archetypal patterns. So the first work, as I have told you, archetypes and the collective unconsciousness, in which he said that three important features of archetypes are collective unconsciousness, then archetypes are primordial, archetypes are universal, mythologies, according to Carl Jung, mythologies are the textbooks of archetypes. Okay, mythologies are the textbooks of archetypes. So, for instance, we have evil Ravana and Rama in Rama is the hero in Ramayana. Then in Greek we have Hercules, uh, myth of Hercules. We say how was who was Hercules? Why he is famous? He is famous for his strong hold and his power, isn't it? Hercules is famous for that reason. So this question that I was referring, myth criticism focuses on the recurrent, very easy, the recurrent of the archetypal pattern. This has been asked in UGC. Now, Jung was also associated to analytical psychology, also called Jungian psychology, which emphasized the um, importance of the individual psyche and the personal quest for wholeness. Now, what are the key concepts that he used while he was talking about uh, archetypes and archetypal patterns? So, first one is that archetypal images or primordial images. We have already talked about that. Second term that he talked about was complex. Okay, the name of the term itself is complex. Complex. That things are complex in our mind. How we remember things are very complex. Third term is extraversion and introversion. Extraversion, when a person is very talkative, then we call extraversion. And when a person likes to be lonely, do not wants to talk a lot, they are for version which are known as introversion. Okay, extraversion, introversion. Then fourth term that he gave was shadow. Shadow, according to Carl Jung, is like Freud's id. Okay, id, ego, superego we have. So shadow is like id, like Freud's id, unconscious aspect of the personality. It is related to unconscious, if you remember. So shadow is related to unconscious aspect of personality. Okay, shadow is the unknown side of a human. Alright. Shadow is the darker, sometimes hidden elements of person's psyche. It is related to id. Okay, there it is. Term. Then the fifth term is anima. Anima. See, anima and animus. Anima is the feminine aspect. Feminine aspect. Now, unconscious feminine side of a man. The person is man, but they have unconscious feminine side also. It's not that if a person is male, that means he has every quality of male only and no feminine quality. It's not that. Okay. Paris and Tom Jones, they have some feminine quality also. If you will read this work, Paris in the Iliad and Tom Jones in the history of Tom Jones, a foundling. So they have feminine qualities which are unconsciously revealed at some point of time. So, anima stands for the unconscious feminine side of a man, of a man. Do remember. And animus stands for unconscious masculine side of a woman. Okay, the male aspect that can be seen even in the women character. Okay, Then collective unconsciousness is something about which I have already said, a set of primal memories common to the human race existing below each person's conscious mind. Then he gave this term persona. What does persona mean? The image we present to the world. Okay, we have a kind of image which is what we show to this world, and an image which is hidden, which the side which only we know. So persona is consciously created personality, a personality that we want to project of ours in front of people. This is called persona. And self is there is another term self. It is one of the archetype unification of consciousness and unconsciousness. Okay, self is the unification of consciousness and unconsciousness. So I say that there are key terms associated with Carl Jung. They are archetypal images, complex, extraversion, introversion, then shadow. Then the next term is anima, animus. Then we have self. Then we have individualism. Then we have persona. These are the important terms associated with Carl Jung. What are his important work? First one is memories, dreams, reflections. Second is synchronicity. And third important work is psychology of the unconscious. Apart from that, he also wrote symbols of transformation, answer to the job. But then these three highlighted works are important. Do remember this. And the first work, obviously, the most important is archetype and the collective unconscious. I have already told you about this. Now, the most important critique associated with archetypal criticism. Canadian literary theorist and critic Northrop Frye. He wrote this work, Fearful Symmetry, 1947, Anatomy of Criticism, The Well-Tempered Critique, Great Code, Bush Garden Essay on Canadian Imagination. Okay, these are all the important work written by him. Apart from the other works that are there, which are not highlighted. So in Great Work is a two-volume book talking about how Bible providing symbolic images that can be used in order to understand the Western literature. Okay, again, a kind of mythical pattern that is there in the Bible, which has been followed by almost all the literary piece written in Western literature, Western narrative. Okay, so this refers to the archetypal pattern again, the great code. That's why this work is important. Bush Garden essay on Canadian imagination is again important. Why? Because in this essay, he used these two important terms which are very famous. First one is garrison mentality. Okay, garrison mentality. He used this term in the Bush Garden essays on Canadian imagination. He said that mentality is the defensive mentality that we have. Okay, we have this kind of defensive mentality. This is what he refers to garrison mentality. Now, Atwood, while she was writing her essays, Survival, she used this term garrison mentality, borrowed it from Northrop Frye. Okay, Atwood used this term garrison mentality in her work, borrowed from Northrop Frye. Now, the second important term used by Northrop Frye was strangled articulateness. Okay, strangled articulateness. Strangled mean obviously you understand is strangled means suffocative. Articulateness means the ability to write or speak. Sometimes there is we suffer from this suffocative, or you can say we suffer from this writer's block when we are not able to write something, when we are not able to speak something. So strangled articulateness is a term used for that matter by Northrop. He also wrote on T.S. Eliot, Shakespearean comedy and romance, and The Return of Eden, five essays on Milton's epics. These are all the books written by him. Now, Anatomy of Criticism, very famous work written by him, consists of four essays. All these essays are very important. First one is historical criticism, second is ethical criticism, third is archetypal criticism, and fourth is rhetorical criticism. Okay, you can arrange it these criticism in this way, a kind of mnemonic that you can use is here, HEAR, here. Okay, historical, ethical, archetypal, rhetorical. Okay, HEAR. You can use this. Three major concepts used by uh, Northrop Frye. First one was that four kinds of literature. In every part of world, in every kind of literature, we have four kinds of literature. Okay. Northrop Frye has divided literature into two major types. First one is comedy, another is tragedy. Okay. Apart from these four kinds, first of all, we have to divide literature into two different major parts. First one will be comedy, second will be tragedy. Now, comedy will talk about in comedy he said that comedy along with romance should be put, okay, in the comment. In tragic we will put tragedy and satire. This is what he says. He says that these four kinds of literature is comedy, tragedy, romance and satire. Okay, first one is comedy, second is tragedy, third is romance and fourth is satire. Now each of these four genres actually stands for four different seasons. These becomes the archetypal scheme for these literary genres. For example, summer comedy actually stands for spring, tragedy stands for autumn, romance stands for summer, satire stands for winter. Or you can say other way around, that summer stands for romance. uh, s- Summer is a good season, especially in the Western context, because most of the time there is winter in Western country. So summer is a pleasant kind of weather. That's why it is related to associated with romance. Pleasant things are happening. Autumn is associated with tragedy. Do you remember Ode to Autumn, falling of the leaves? So it's a kind of tragic situation. Leaves are falling. Seems as if death has overcome all over us. So that kind of situation. So autumn stands for tragedy. Winter again, there is a chilling effect. People cannot go out, so it stands for satire or irony. Okay, and then spring is pleasant, again pleasant kind of weather, where we enjoy things, so it stands for comedy. Okay, this is how, see, he made a pattern out of weather. He somehow associated weather with the genres, and he came up with this idea that four kinds of literature are there, which is also said as mythoia. Okay, mythoia. He says that in all these particular pattern, you will find a progress of character in is going on. Okay, progress of character is going on at every as every novel starts in summer, which shows romance and the birth of the hero, then shows the youth, that is growth. Autumn is symbolic of movement towards the um, defeat of or the death of the hero. Okay, autumn stands for tragedy. It stands for the death of the hero, or it stands for the age of the hero. He is becoming old now. Or autumn can also stand for the maturity of the hero. Okay, so that's how you can relate this weather to the growth of the protagonist in the novel. In winter, the hero is absent, he's dead. In spring, there is a rebirth of the hero. That's how, see, that's how we start to relate things. Okay, you will read this PDF and you will get more information. Now, he said that there are six kind of, he's further said that there are six kind of spheres. What are they? Human, animal, vegetation, mineral, water, divine. These are the uh, six different spheres present in a kind of word. He also divided the literature in two major parts. He will be talking about different symbols from each of these spheres. Uh, Now, a question has been asked from This is very typical kind of. It's hard to remember, but if you can figure it out, it can become easy for you. See these human, animal, vegetation, mineral, water, divine. So in human world is represented as comedy, uh, then tragedy. Okay, animal world is related with this comedy, pastoral comedy. Pastoral, because why pastoral? Because it deals with the shepherd, the story of the shepherd on the meadow, or tragedy in which hunter or predatory allusions are there. Now, vegetation, in vegetation, comedy stands for pastoral romance. Okay, again, a meadow stands for vegetation. In tragedy, we have wild forest and barren land. So, see how these animal, vegetation, mineral stands or depicted in different genres. You need to figure out that in order to remember this, if you are getting my point. So in human, we have comedy, and in comedy, we have wish fulfilling of the human being, happy and pleasant. Then we have tragedy, someone is dying or someone is fighting, something like that. When it comes to the animal imagery, you will see that in comedy, they will show the pastoral romance, which deals with the shepherd and sheep, so it is associated somehow with the animal. In tragedy, sometimes the tragedy and some of the story will deal with the theme of hunting, hunter, predatory allusions. Again, it goes back to the qualities of an animal. In vegetation, again, this pastoral romance also depicts a kind of meadow, a grassland. So it is related to vegetation. In tragedy, wild forests are shown. Again, it is related to vegetation. In mineral, comedy stands for precious stone. Precious stone is related to mineral. In tragedy, ruined castle. Again, this is somehow and rocks and desert associated with mineral. That's how he associated all these six types or kind of archetype with each of the genres. How you can see those things on in the genre itself. Now, what he was saying, I will come back to this work, Bush Garden, and the Canadian criticism that he did. Northrop. So he was a writer from Canada. He talks about his country and tells about what is wrong with the Canadian literature. There he refers to this garrison mentality, that we Canadian people have this garrison mentality, this defensive mentality. He says that Canadian literature is heavily garrison mentality. In the text written by writers, characters are always looking outwards and they are always building metaphorical walls against the outside world. They do not want to cope with the outside world. They do not want let them in their country. Okay, this defensive mentality somehow stopping us to collaborate with others. This is what is saying. This suspicion towards the outside world. They don't want to go out and interact with other world. This mentality assumed to come from the Canadian identity, according to Northrop. This term garrison mentality was first used and coined by Northrop, which has been later used by Margaret Atwood in uh, her book Survivor. Okay, the subtitle of Survival is A Thematic Guide to Canadian Literature. It's a critical work. Then the next term he used, I told you, strangled articulateness. Okay, when a writer is not able to fluently write or speak his thought, this is called strangled articulateness. So he said about four genres in which he never talked about lyrics. This was there in the option. Okay, he talked about the um, historical criticism, ethical criticism, archetypal criticism, rhetorical criticism. He also talked about comedy, tragedy, romance, and satire, and not about lyrics. Lyrics was there in the option, so it would be the right answer. Okay, which one is not mentioned by Northrop Frye? This question has been asked while he was talking about the four kinds of literature. So this genre lyrics was not included in that. We have talked about the book. So that's it for archetypal criticism. We have that much of information. That is